You're listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria, session number 18.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Hey everybody, it's Matt Sikoria. This is session 18 of the Behavioral Observations Podcast, and I am thrilled to be joined by not one, not two, but three guests today. So this is my first multi-guest episode, and I really appreciate you guys coming along for the ride with me on this. I am joined today by Manny Rodriguez, Shannon Biaggi, and Dan Sundberg, all from ABA Technologies. And they stopped by to talk to us about their recently published book series, OBM Applied. And so they talk about kind of why they wrote the book, the intended audience, and most importantly, what sort of outcome one can expect by reading the book and applying its strategies and tactics. We also talk a lot about the writing process, and these guys were kind enough to do two things. One is, after the interview, Manny sent me kind of a bullet list or a cheat sheet, if you will, that think of it as a guide to maintaining productivity throughout the writing process, especially in the context of writing something with multiple authors. So they kind of gave us a little guide about how to, not procrastinate and to, get in the writing mode, if you will. So there's lots of cool stuff like that for anyone who's contemplating writing a book or trying to finish a dissertation or thesis and things like that. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to as well is these guys have generously discounted the book from now until the end of the 2016 calendar year. So if you want to pick up the book, you can go to lulu.com and put OBM Applied into the little search bar, and all their stuff should come up. And I will have links to all this stuff in the show notes as well. So you just need to head over to behavioralobservations.com and look for session 18, and you'll be good to go. So just one more thing, or two more things before we get to the interview itself. One is we had a little bit of audio problems throughout the recording, so it might sound a little different, and then we also had to stop the recording and restart it and things like that. So at one point I think it's fairly noticeable where we kind of resumed the conversation. So Skype decided not to work on the day we recorded this, so we had to go to a plan B. And then secondly, before we get to the interview itself, I want to let you know that this podcast is sponsored by bside21.org's ABA Outside the Box CE series. You've heard me talk about that before. It's a really cool continuing ed event. So you can go to bside21.org/CEUS to learn more about that. And I know Todd Ward and the rest of the contributors over there are busy making more CE events. So if you've already partaken in the one about having difficult conversations, well, good for you, because it's an excellent training. And like I said, they should be having more going forward. So anywho, enough talking on my part. Let's get right to the interview. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Manny, Shannon, and Dan. Thanks a lot. Okay, joining me today is Manny Rodriguez, Shannon Biaggi, right?
You got it.
All right, just checking. And Dan Sundberg, all from ABA Technologies. And we're talking today about the book that they just put out, or books, I should say, OBM Applied, with an exclamation point, right?
With an exclamation point.
All right, cool. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining me today. And thanks for joining me in this experiment. This is the first kind of multi-person interview I've conducted. So this could go horribly wrong in so many ways, but we'll cross our fingers and hope for the best, and talk about some fun stuff in the realm of organizational behavior management. So Manny, you were kind enough to join me, and I think it was session 9 of the podcast, which has been one of the more popular episodes. It's been downloaded over 5,000 times, if you can believe that. And I've gotten lots of feedback from listeners as well. who listened to the show enjoyed it and said more, please. So I'm really thrilled to have not only you back, but your colleagues back to talk about this this book that you guys have probably poured your heart and soul into. So, so long story short, we know you, Manny, right?
And I'm glad to be back, Matt. So thank you for having me back, and also my colleagues here. And thanks to your listeners for listening. I had a fun time doing that first podcast, so I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, cool. So we know you, but I'd like to give Shannon and Dan an opportunity to kind of introduce themselves and kind of talk about how they got into the field and so on and so forth. So Shannon, why don't you take it away? Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and how you got into behavior analysis and how you ended up with this crew here?
All right. So I started in behavior analysis by lieu of a psychology degree that wouldn't really get me anywhere. I think a lot of behavior analysts end up with the same kind of story. So I started through there and looking for jobs. I just stumbled into a position working for an incredible behavior analyst named Tiki Fiol, and she turned me into a behavior analytic mastermind that I'm able to work clinically. And through working clinically, I eventually ended up working for the continuing education at Florida Tech. So starting to work on instructional design to further educate behavior analysts. And for those who don't know, ABA Technologies works very closely with Florida Tech. So it just so happened that Manny and I started working at the same time, looking at similar data. And then I kind of fell into this position at ABA Tech with Manny. And then he was like, I've got this idea for this great OBM set of coursework, and we need a book, and we need an entire learning management system dedicated to this. So what do you think? I was like, okay, let's do this. So that's kind of how I ended up in this seat talking to you right now.
All right, very cool. Dan, how about yourself? How'd you get into behavior analysis?
Well, I kind of had it a little bit of a roundabout way as well. I started off in undergraduate in a very traditional psychology program and took a couple of business classes and really liked that and wanted to get into business psychology, find some sort of blend of that. Found one of the Florida Tech online courses, the Intro to Behavior Analysis course, and took that, loved behavior analysis, decided, you know what, I want to see if I can, the psychology stuff is great, this behavior analysis stuff is great, this business stuff is great. And fortunately at that time, Florida Tech had an OBM program. So after graduating undergrad, I decided to jump in and went there for my master's degree and kept going and wound up at Western Michigan University for a PhD program. And then after graduation, started looking around for, what's next, and went back to Jose from Florida Tech. And as usually, as I'm sure so many people can attest, you sit down, you have a conversation with Jose, and he kind of paints this grand picture of the world. And by the end of the conversation, he'd sold me on coming to work for ABA Technologies and building out this OBM consulting business and everything. And from there, met Manny, talked with Manny, and Manny and Jose are very much alike, and they've got this grand vision of the way the world can be and are great at painting that for people. And so it's like, let's bring OBM to the world. All right, let's do it.
All right, cool. And so what do you guys do, you two in particular, since we kind of got Manny's a deal, if you will, in the previous interview. What are your guys' roles at ABA Technologies, excuse me?
Well, I am what's called a product development specialist. So I help develop new products, new ways that we can disseminate our science to the world. So that's where the role that I really play, focusing a lot on the continuing education program. So after your certification, when you continue to get those hours, that's a lot of what I do.
Okay, so you develop. Now, are you involved in the tech end in terms of the filming and the editing and things like that, or do you are you reaching out to potential people? I've partaken in a few Florida Tech CEs, so I'm a little familiar. Yeah, anytime, yeah.
So usually when you see a speaker on that little camera, I'm usually right off screen.
Mm-hmm.
So giving them like hand signals and communicating with the studio. So I'm actually the director a lot of the time for these speakers that you're seeing on the screen. I also edit all their PowerPoints. I'm pretty much behind the scenes working that whole thing. And Manny's usually the one reaching out to the speakers, and I get them toward the the end of the process when they're getting ready to actually get in front of the camera.
I see. So you're the one who compiles all those ASRs.
Oh, Lord. Yes.
No, she's the one that makes sure the ASRs make sense.
Ah, okay. All right. All right. So that's where the cards and letters should go to. Shannon at avatechnologies.com.
Send all complaints that way.
Okay. All right.
All right. One thing I'll do, Matt, if you don't mind, I'll just do a couple of plugs for each of them because they're both very modest individuals.
All right.
Besides being a product development specialist, Shannon is also the project manager for our OBM certificate program. So all participants, all projects, everything that goes through the OBM certificate program goes right through Shannon. So she's managing the entire project from end to end, including continuous improvement work that we're going to be doing for 2017. So right now, the OBM certificate, the version we have right now, has celebrated over 90 participants in less than a year. And all 90 participants have gone through her capable hands in terms of making sure that they get the entire experience from end to end.
I see. What exactly does the OBM certificate entail? I know we're here to talk about the book, but you brought it up. So can you give us a quick rundown? I think we talked about this very briefly the last time, but if you guys can tell me a little bit about what that's about and who it's intended for and et cetera, that would be awesome.
All right. So the elevator pitch, if you will, of the OBM certificate, it's a 3-course program delivered and offered by Florida Tech. ABA Technologies is the instructional designers and the delivery, the people that are delivering the courses. It's 3 courses. The first 2 are on demand online. The first one's called OBM Essentials, presented primarily by Dr. Byron Wine. And the end cap of that course is by Dr. Aubrey Daniels himself. That is kind of the epitome of an introduction to OBM. It's a great course. A lot of people love that course. Over 400 people have taken that course, so it's a great course. It's really that introduction to the science applied to business. The second course is kind of a unique spin of OBM applied to training and development, and it's called Learning in the Workplace. That was instructed by a guy named Dr. Thor Flosesen, who works out of Kellogg's. Kellogg's, the cereal company. Mm-hmm. So Thor did a fantastic job kind of walking people through the dynamics of learning and development in the workplace, from traditional models to more advanced models. So that's a great course. A lot of people like that, especially those who don't really learn about training development from an adult learning standpoint. The third course is where the 3 of us have come in from the beginning. So the third course is actually titled OBM Applied.
Exclamation point.
Exclamation point. Yeah, and that was actually, I have to give kudos to Shannon. That was her brain right there in terms of marketing. She added that. So OBM Applied, when we first conceptualized that course, the intent was to learn by doing. So we wanted people to essentially apply the skills of OBM to an actual project where they work. So whether so we'll talk about kind of the participants in a second, but the essential skills of learning OBM can really, from our experience, really can only be learned by doing it. So you do the assessments, you do the interviews with stakeholders, you identify the solutions, you implement it, you figure out if it works, doesn't work, and then you kind of troubleshoot along the way. The book that we're talking about today, OBM Applied, the 4 volumes, actually started as Word documents and PDFs for the course. Mm-hmm. And the intent of that is we wanted students not to just learn from the instructors who present the information and the content, but also to learn it by a handbook that they can use when implementing their project. So the unique feature of the third course is that there is a live instructor. So the first 2 courses are on demand, online, at your fingertips. You watch it when you're ready. The third course, however, has scheduled dates and has live instructors that you meet 8 times over the course of 16 weeks. In those 8 times, your instructor is helping guide you through your project. So you're coming prepared to present on how your project's going, and your instructor is giving you live coaching and feedback in real time, along with other participants in your group. And you act as kind of a cohort, if you will.
I see. So would this be like if like someone who is let's say a I don't know if this term is applicable or not, but a so-called traditionally trained behavior analyst, i.e. someone who works with kids with developmental disabilities, spectrum disorders, et cetera, and they were looking for some sort of career change or whatever, would this be one avenue of, in that career change, they wanted to go into more of an OBM type of direction? Would that be a one route to increasing their skill set in that?
Yeah, and in fact, that's been a lot of people that have come through the course that have done this have been in exactly that position. And so, in getting trained up in behavior analysis, I think a lot of people get exposure to OBM, but not as much training and not as much background on what it is, how do you do it, what does it look like. And so the course was really designed, the course in the book is designed primarily for people that are in existing positions, that are in somewhere within a company, internal consultants, as we would say, that are looking to kind of make an impact in their organization and sort of get in and learn about what is this OBM thing? How does it work? How do I do it?
I see.
And another unique feature about the course has been the variety of individuals who have actually passed through. We've had individuals that are not behavior analysts at all with no background in behavioral science. They're individuals in HR. We've had MBAs come through the course. We've had owners, directors of large human services companies. We've got hospitals interested in taking the course. So it's really a course that's designed not only for behavior analysts, but just the general business community as well.
Nice. Very cool. So we kind of took a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it's all related. And before we move on to some of the other questions I had in mind for you, Dan, tell us about what your role is at ABA Technologies.
Yeah. So I'm all the way out here in California. I'm sort of the lone West Coast person out here, away from the main Florida office.
Oh, okay. So we have you up super early this morning.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I apologize.
That's why I was so
we're all
concerned
in South Florida.
A video interview or not. Very grateful that it wasn't.
Well, I do have this recording, so I guess we could. No, I'm just kidding.
Screenshot.
Yeah. So my primary responsibilities really are around the consulting side of ABA Technologies, and we've actually been working on separating out or creating a subdivision of ABA Technologies, really focused on OBM consulting. We've branded operant leadership, kind of giving an homage to the behavioral basis of it and the operant aspect of it. But really what I do is a lot around...
Hey, Dan, I'm sorry. On my end, you just kind of cut out there for a second. So you said something like focus on consulting. And then just in case this cuts out on the actual recording, would you mind just kind of saying what you just said again real quick?
Oh, yeah, no problem. So the focus of my job, what I spend most of my time doing is on developing out the consulting side of our business. And so using OBM with other organizations that will call us in that have various business issues that they want to apply behavior analysis to. They're looking for some solutions to, and it's sort of my job to go out and have those conversations, help figure out if we can help them, if there's ways that we can help them address turnover or contract fulfillment or safety or all these various issues that they might have, and then actually deliver on the work too. So go out and perform the assessments, deliver the solutions, get out there in the field and kind of help do some of the work. So a lot of the material that went into OBM Applied, the book, comes out of that experience. And sort of as we were building this consulting side of the business, I think we were pouring a lot of that into the book, and because we were thinking about the two things very much at the same time.
So I'm guessing you must be getting a lot of experience on the marketing and sales side of that too, right?
Yeah. Which is fun because that wasn't my background at all. Going through graduate school in behavior analysis and OBM, don't learn anything about that. So it's been very much a learn by doing, trial by fire sort of situation. But in so many ways, it's been really fun. And it's been incredibly helpful to have Manny and Shannon, that they work on this too, and they help on this as well. And then a bunch of the other people at ABA Technologies as well chip in. So
I see.
very hard to do it without them.
Right. So have you been able to kind of apply behavioral principles to the sales process or the marketing process? Or I don't want to put you on the spot here. Maybe this is a conversation for, another day once you've had time to reflect on it. But I'm just curious about how that works and stuff like that. Because you're right. These are things that we don't get trained in as behavior analysts. We talk a lot about solutions or interventions, or depending on what population you're working with. And especially these days where the demand for ABA services, at least in the conventional sense, is so high, marketing is, is less of a problem in many, many cases. But I imagine in your situation, you're probably trying to inform or educate people who may not know about these types of solutions, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I've been thinking a lot about how to make it more behavioral. Certainly, from a really basic aspect, when you're going out there, you're always trying to pair yourself as a reinforcer, right? Trying to deliver value, as they kind of say it in the buzzworld. But basically, you're just trying to associate yourself with as much valued consequences as you can for the people that you're having these conversations with. But it's been really surprising too, as I've been educating myself on the whole sales and marketing world that exists out there. There are a lot of people that are doing this stuff, that are doing it in very behavioral ways. It's amazing how data oriented a lot of marketing people are, especially with the amount of information that's available online. And for me, it's been kind of neat because I don't have to try and reinvent the wheel on any things. I see people that are doing things that are behavioral approach. They're not talking about it like behavior analysts do, but they're doing it like they would. And that's really easy. I can say, oh, okay, well, I'll use that. That sounds right.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. All right.
I think you're hitting on this question, and I really like how Dan answered this question. I think one of the things you're hitting on is when you think about the ABA practitioner out there, one of the things that we don't typically learn in graduate studies is how to approach the marketplace with your skill set. So you learn a variety of skills, you learn a science that is fundamental to how you look at the world. But then you go out in the world and you have to say hello to a world that knows nothing about what you know. So how do you approach that world that fundamentally looks at the world very differently than you do? And OBM and ABA in the clinical setting, you're really trying to hone in on how do you communicate what is it that you do and how you do it in a meaningful and value added way. I think OBM is kind of has a uniqueness to it from a marketing standpoint, in that our competition sounds very much like us, but then when they go to apply what they do, it's very different. So like IO psychologists and the kind of change management people of the world, they sound very similar, but then when it comes to what we actually know and do different, it is different. And so we have to figure that out.
I see. There's definitely a lot of different things we need to keep in mind as we're contemplating these things. So I think we could probably talk about all these little nuances for quite a bit of time. But I kind of want to get in, obviously, to the task at hand here and get into the book. So and again, I don't mean to make fun of the exclamation point. I love it. So I'm going to say OBM Applied exclamation point. I'll probably say it a few more times. So. I think it's good though. It kind of makes it stuck out. So I guess being memorable is good.
Talk about marketing. That's called branding.
Yeah, there we go. Branding exclamation point.
Yeah.
To get for the exclamation point to make sense, you just got to hear Manny say it, and it flows out. It's like OBM Applied.
Well, that's a better alternative than say a question mark. OBM Applied.
OBM Applied? Yeah,
really
work.
So let me start with kind of a general question here. We may have kind of hit on this earlier, but just to kind of make sure we underscore the point here. Why did you guys write this book? Or these books? There's 4 volumes, and we can get into that.
So it's a great question. The primary reason for writing this book, when we started, we built the course, OBM Applied, at the same time of writing the book. So they went hand in hand, right? And we wanted the book to accompany the course in a way so that each student, when they take the course, they have it in their hands, they can review it, they can refer to it, and in each chapter of each volume of the books, there's worksheets and tools and templates for them to use when they're implementing their project. Probably really early on in the writing process, we kind of had that like aha moment that we don't want this to just be a book for the course. There's really very few books out there helping people understand how to implement what we call OBM, right? So how do you implement behavioral science applied to business? What does that look like? So there's very few books out there, and even those that are out there, it's very basic. So there's some things that are missing from those of us that have been out in the field consulting this stuff for years. So why did we write the book? We wanted to disseminate OBM. Part of ABA Technology's mission in life is to disseminate and educate in behavior analysis, all facets of behavior analysis. And it's not just a tagline, that's actually what we do. So when I came and Dan came on the company and Shannon came in the company, one of our main facets of our work is OBM and disseminate, educating, and consulting in OBM. So when you Google OBM, not many books out there that actually use even the terminology organizational behavior management. So that's kind of one of the main reasons that triggered us to write this book. We wanted a book called OBM to start effectively disseminating in a meaningful way. How do you do this stuff called OBM? Now, for me, I'll just end with one of the last reasons. Over the years, one of the main questions I get from people from ABA academia programs or practitioners is, how do I learn about OBM and how do I do it? So they're constantly asking for a book like this that really walks them through the dynamics of implementing a project. So that's why we wrote the book.
I see. And I was going to ask you who it's for, and again, it kind of sounds like the answer might be similar to the who is the OBM certificate for, but talk about the types of end users you have in mind with this series.
So, the majority of the people that have used it so far have been behavior analysts, but as Shannon said, we've gotten already a lot of people from outside of the behavioral world that have jumped onto it. And really, when we were writing it, we were trying to write it with a general audience in mind. We hope that more behavior analysts learn about OBM, but ultimately our goal is for more people to learn about OBM in the general community. And so it's really written in mind for people that don't have as much of a behavioral background or any behavioral background. We tried to add, simplify down the behavior speak, keep it in there where it's useful and functional, but really make it approachable for someone that's got less of a behavioral background too.
So what is oh yeah, go ahead.
So another target audience for this and end user that we were really interested in is getting into not only ABA undergraduate programs, graduate programs, new people coming to the field that don't have a lot of experience. If we get to them early enough, we can make a greater impact on their practice as ABA practitioners and even as just general business practitioners, individuals going into business. So university programs are another really interesting audience that we would like to start reaching as well. And we've gotten some interest, which has been super cool.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say someone gets the 4 volumes. They read them all. They do all the exercises in them and things like that. What is the anticipated kind of transformation or outcome or set of skills that person is going to have as a result of reading these 4 books and really trying to follow through with all the suggestions, et cetera?
So I'll start off by saying, let me give some data on what's happened, because I think that's probably more so than just what I hope, right? So we had aspirations, we had theories and hopes, and we could share those with you guys. But I think just telling you a couple of stories would probably suffice. We've had a great deal of interest in people that have purchased the books, as well as people that went through the course. What's been very fascinating to hear is a couple of data points where people that have taken the books, implemented their projects, actually got promotions in their company. They were being asked to implement more OBM type of projects for their company. And then fundamentally from C executives, right? C-suite executives. So your CEOs, your COOs, your CFOs, these individuals who sponsored people to implement projects and buy the books have also found some very significant value for their business, for their companies, by virtue of the outcomes of their OBM projects. So I think to answer your question, the value proposition is not just what's in the book and what they do coming out of the book, it's what happens after, because they're learning skill sets that are providing value to their company. And so therefore it's really professional development. This book is intended to develop people's skills in a new, fantastic way that also brings value to their company. One of the things that we teach in the course, but we also emphasize all along the book, is that OBM is the science of behavior applied to work. But it's not just about behavior change or behavior improvement. It's also about those tangible business results that you're trying to achieve. Because of that link, the business entrepreneur, the business CEO, executive totally latches on to what happens as a result of reading this book. Because the practitioner who does the project is looking to achieve a significant outcome for the business.
Cool. Okay, guys, we had to take a brief pause to attend to some technological issues, but thanks for being patient and being back with us. And so we talked about the rationale for the book, the intended user, what the kind of anticipated outcome or transformation of reading and applying the principles in the book. We talked about that sort of thing. But I want to talk about the writing process itself. I have talked to a variety of behavior analysts who, it's going to sound cliche to anyone who's kind of studied writing itself, but they I'm using air quotes here, have a book in them, if you will. So I want to talk about the writing process. So, and of course, there are 3 authors, so then we might be talking about several processes here. And in general, or each of you can kind of take this in any direction you want, but talk about how you wrote the book, and I'm talking about actually putting words on paper and so forth, not the actual, kind of philosophical, idea behind, the book itself and some of the things we've talked about previously.
Yeah, so I'll start off and just say that I think that we got the book written in like an incredibly short period of time. Like we probably broke some book writing records. We started, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we started in about October of 2015.
Right.
And we're finished with the last chapter by February of 2016.
That's right.
And so there's 10 chapters, about 300 or 400 pages to this thing. And the reason that we got it done was, the way that we got it done was real simple. Was because there were really strong contingencies. From a behavioral perspective, there was no room for procrastination in there, because we had beta test groups for the course that we're going through. And so it was every week sitting down in front of the computer. We got to get this unit out by Friday, because, we've got people that are expecting it. That has to be done. And there was no wiggle room around it. And so it was just, all right, every single day. It was like, being back in grad school where it was finals week, except for it was like that every single week. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to get this paper done by Friday.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it was, we divvy up the sections and get them out, and then, send them to each other for revision, and just we're kind of constantly going.
Yeah. And if it gives you an idea, so the book writing process took from about October to February. We didn't actually get a reasonable published copy until September. Mm-hmm. So just the editing process took from February to September.
I see.
I've read this book about 3 times now, all the way through, over 400 pages.
I see.
It was insane.
Yeah, and we had some really, really fantastic beta testers that went through the course that helped us so much in refining the content. And, were so patient with us as we were putting all of this out there. And, they'd send us email feedback or whatever and tell us during the course, this doesn't make sense, or this is great, keep this. Honestly, there were some parts that I thought, I was like, man, there's no one's going to want this. And it came back and people were like, we love it. And there were some parts that I thought, this is going to be great. People were like, this is music. So.
Manny, tell us about your experience with writing the book.
Well, so this is my first book. I've written articles, and I've written, I even co-wrote some chapters for other books, but never this magnitude and this volume. So for me, I mean, the experience for me was a little bit, what's the right word? I guess there's a lot of nostalgia for me when I see this book, when I look at it printed and I look at the work that we've done. These two have said everything that I think is of value to say. We had great beta testers and all that. I think for me, the only thing I would add to this discussion is I love the fact that I had co-authors, because writing this book by yourself would be a huge undertaking. So the fact that we divvied up the work, I don't even know how many references we have in this book, but I would argue that this is probably one of those books in our field that is the most heavily referenced. We have more references in every chapter than I've seen in a long time. Mm-hmm. So I would go to Vegas and bet that this is probably one of those books that has more references than most. And we did that particularly because we really wanted to stay true to the science and really bring home that this is a science that's been around for a long time. And so we wanted to tap into that. So for me, the writing process was very nostalgic. After being in this field for 15 years, it brings it all together for me. So we have research in there. We have perspectives from people newly into this field. We have stories from all sorts of different industries and different examples, and then to put the tools in the hands of people. For me, from a consulting standpoint, that's where our clients seem to get the most value, right? Is when we put that assessment tool in front of them, or we put a checklist in front of them to help them understand how to unlock the potential of human behavior. So for me, the writing process, again, the word for me is nostalgia, because writing itself was pretty painful, because it's a long, tedious process to really write this stuff in a way that you think is going to lend itself to people understanding. So, but it came out fantastic, and the reason it came out fantastic, in my opinion, was because I had co-authors. Because otherwise, I think I'd lose the little hair I have left on my head. Which is not much, Matt. It's not much. So
yeah. The writing process, I think, was made easier and harder in a lot of ways, because with this book, we weren't really trying to reinvent the wheel on anything. We have, I think it's novel in the sense that it brings so much together from the field. But the different sections of the book, the different components of it is kind of like a mishmash of all sorts of different research literature and best practices out there, and pulling together a lot of different materials. So we weren't like creating anything that was totally new or different. It was, I think, the biggest value of this book is bringing together all of these aspects and putting it in a process and putting it all in one place.
So it's kind of like a curation.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's so many really, really fantastic books on OBM out there, and really fantastic books on project management and all these different aspects that it pulls together. But one thing that I've seen and heard is it's hard to put that into context and to figure out okay, I know how to do a PDC, a performance diagnostic checklist. How do I incorporate that into fixing the turnover problem that we have at our organization? How do I mesh these things together? And so that's what I think the book is really well. That's what we were really trying to focus on as we were doing the writing too.
So tell me about, and I think any behavior analyst who works with lay people has this, I guess, burden, if you will, the burden of information that I'm referring to specifically. So if you guys are out there in the field, you're consulting, you're doing all this, really cool stuff, from a writing perspective, writing for a reader who may or possibly may not be behaviorally savvy. Talk about the challenge of trying not to skimp on the principles while at the same time remaining accessible to people who are unfamiliar with some behavior analytic concepts.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. One of the things that lent itself to writing this book for that audience, I would say a couple of things. First, prior to joining ABA Technologies, my whole world as a practitioner has been working with people who know nothing about behavior analysis. So when the three of us were kind of putting our heads together about each chapter and what's the stories and the language that we want to use, we kept it pretty straightforward and simple. We try to make it so that anytime we talked any technical language from behavior analysis, we try to simplify it in a way that says, okay, this is what we mean by operational definitions of behavior, or what we call pinpointing in OBM. So what is pinpointing? And we just kind of kept it that way. The other thing that helped us, I think, is we integrated examples after examples. So the use of examples, first of all, in our other work, in our continuing education work with Florida Tech and our consulting work, we hear all the time the best way people learn what we do and about behavior analysis is through the use of examples. So our students and our customers of this book have told us the very same thing. The examples is what hits them home. So we could talk about we could use technical language of behavior analysis all the time now because we know the pairing of the technical language with a really solid example hits it home. So when we're writing this book, we've fundamentally focused on giving them a tool, giving them the science, but also giving them examples that really can resonate with them in a very easy way to absorb it all. So for me, that's how I would answer that question.
I see. When you guys kind of sorted out the different tasks and things like that, or the steps, did you use any, kind of OBM or behavior analytic principles in terms of the writing of the book itself? I asked that question not to put you on the spot because I think I remember when I was a graduate student at Auburn University, we'd be talking about behavior analysis and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying this to kind of, I guess I'm kind of gently poking fun at some of the people. Nonetheless, we learned lots of stuff. I'm actually trying not to put my foot as far into my mouth as possible here. However, I will make the observation that very often we had, kind of, for a quarter or semester long class, there was, a giant take home test and, a paper or something like that. And in other words, the instruction didn't follow, I guess what we consider, state of the art instructional design. It was traditional, academia. All right.
All direct instruction.
So I'm wondering, to what extent you guys use the, any type of principles to kind of stay productive. Obviously having that, it sounds like there was some negative reinforcement at work, in terms of avoiding the, the terrible outcome of not having, the materials in the hands of people who are users, supposed to use them and things like that. But can you talk about perhaps other strategies you may or may not have used? If you didn't, talk about why you didn't.
So I can kind of speak to this because I was heavily responsible for managing the actual writing process and making sure things were getting in, that the books were getting uploaded into the courses on the right time. So we set a lot of timelines. We set a lot of goals, because we had to have it in review to the rest of the group at a certain date. So we had Gantt charts, which Gantt charts are like really advanced timelines. We had lots of task analyses. So each chapter had to go through a set of processes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we had checklists and shared Google Docs and Excel sheets, and everything is color coded. And they laugh at me because everything's color coded in the rainbow. And that has melded into the course, and students like it because it keeps them organized as well. but we had adopted these color codings and these processes because it made us more productive. So I would say we used a lot of OBM strategies in order to make sure that we were staying on time. And there were a lot of negative reinforcement contingencies, but without the processes behind it and the ability to use those processes, then the negative reinforcement contingency doesn't mean much. You're just going to contact the punishment eventually if you don't have those processes leading up.
Yeah, and on a kind of day-to-day aspect of doing the writing too, I know I personally use a lot of like self-management principles in that too. So breaking down the actual writing task into its different components. So, if Manny would send a chapter that I was going to review, it would be like, all right, item number 1, first pass, read through it once, get a sense for the chapter. Item number 2, high-level proofing of content structure, reordering. Item number 3, and have like an actual checklist rather than just like finish the edits. It was broken down very, very discreetly. And then when I was actually writing to having daily goals around, I think I used pages written. I might have used words. I can't remember now, but having like actual writing goals day to day and crossing it off the checklist, and making that just sort of like every single day. All right, I got to get 500 words on this chapter, and just going through and having it, really broken down into smaller goals.
Yeah, I've heard that as a writing process. It's like having a daily goal of, if at least I can write two pages a day, and they don't have to be 2 pages of quality. So I've heard people refer. I need to write 2 crappy pages a day, and if I do that every single day, it doesn't take long to accumulate and become something that's editable. So.
One of the things that Dan hinted at that I think also worked well, at least I know it did for me in particular, is every chapter was reviewed by all 3 of us. So if Dan took the lead on one chapter, I reviewed it after he was done with it. And then if I was done reviewing it and we did a bit of back and forth, once we thought it was done, then Shannon reviewed it as well, not just from a formatting side, but also she put a lens on it from a student side, right? That student perspective. And the same thing goes when Shannon wrote a chapter, I'd review it, and so on and so forth. So I think for me, there was some good contingency management there as well, right? So we were giving each other feedback, both positive and constructive feedback. We were editing all the time. It was just this constant ebb and flow for every chapter. So imagine if you're a single author, you get almost very little feedback until you get somebody like an editor to review it. We were constantly ebbing and flowing, editing this thing over the course of just a few months, every chapter. So 10 chapters worth of back and forth like that. It was a lot of feedback going on.
Are there specific tools or software that you guys use that facilitated this process? I know you mentioned Google Docs and things like that.
Yeah, so from a project management standpoint, Shannon kind of walked through a bunch of those tools. You can reiterate some of them if you like, but on the writing side, we kept them all on Word, Microsoft Word, and we did a tracker and did a lot of editing that way. I can't remember if we did anything besides Word.
No, we didn't. And I will say that each chapter was its own individual Word document. All of the exercises were their own individual Word documents. All of the appendices were their own original Word documents. And then you combine them all in Word, and then everything goes haywire. Because somebody, and I'm not going to say any names, but the gentleman next to me, Manny, loves to use numbered lists. So when you combine all the Word documents, all of the numbered lists become one giant numbered list. It was fabulous.
It's amazing from a formatting standpoint.
Yeah.
Imagine, and the fact that Shannon does sit next to me in an office, it was quite excruciating to listen to the feedback.
So right click, restart numbering. You had to master that, right?
1,000 times.
No, actually, so I wrote another book that's coming out soon, and potentially another book next year. And I'm just simply avoiding bullets and number lists altogether because they are terrible.
And because Shannon is also helping format this one. And I told him no
more lists.
All right. Yes.
It's a painful process.
Yeah, Shannon drew a picture a while ago that I think kind of describes this very nicely, where Manny is the balloon, I'm the string, and she's the rock that holds it all down.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good diagram. We should probably send that to you. You can put that on the podcast.
Cover photo for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
probably some, a Freudian might make a reference to egos and super egos. Or
hey, wait a minute. This is a behavioral podcast. Freud, man. What's going on?
You brought up the no, just kidding. So, anything else about the writing process itself? Did you guys I've heard about some authors saying, well, if I don't set a structure or routine for writing, it doesn't get done. And I've heard of people either say, they get up at 5 and they write before everyone gets up, in the house, or, setting aside parts of your day and things like that. And I know you guys also travel a lot and things like that. And so I'm just kind of curious of how you manage to, if you set a routine for writing, and if so, how did you work that into what I imagine is kind of a busy travel schedule and things like that, and other obviously family and professional commitments?
Yeah, so I would say that a couple of things. So one is being a team member at ABA Technologies. We wear multiple hats. We're doing multiple things at once. In fact, we are probably extraordinary at being able to juggle multiple projects at the same time, writing being one of them. So I would say, based on what I observed from the three of us, one of the things that seemed to work fairly well in the writing process is we started with a template for each chapter. So we structured a template to work from in terms of the organization of the chapter, not necessarily the content, just how it was structured. So when I had to write a chapter, once we had that template down, it was helpful in terms of trying to organize all my thinking. The other thing that we did that was extremely helpful was we started with outlines of each chapter first. So we didn't write paragraph and all that. We just started with an outline. So we said, what's the content and what's the activities that we want people to do in each chapter? That was extremely helpful from a time management standpoint, because then once the writing started, we just used the outline and really just kind of flowed from there. And then I would say I did traveling during the course of the writing, and every airport, every plane, every time I had an opportunity, hotel room, what have you, writing commenced. It was definitely part of filling in any time slots that I had was filled with writing this book. And so nights, weekends, holidays, it didn't matter. It was the only opportunity that I had to write it for myself. So I think the tip there is, when you really are dedicated to writing something like this, or any book really, then you really just have to dedicate your time, whatever time that is, to getting it done. Otherwise, you run the risk of what other authors have told us in the past, which is that it takes them 1 to 2 to 3 years to finish a book. And that's just not conducive or productive.
Right. Yeah. I also kind of thinking about the writing process and the self-management thing, and getting the book written. What you said about the morning thing, that was me on a lot of days, getting up early, and I tried to have it block out the writing time at the same time of the day as much as possible, and then kind of knowing generally what the times of the day were that I was most effective at writing, which generally tends to be between 5:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and then 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the evening. So then blocking those times out during the day, reserving them on the calendar of writing time, setting it up. So one thing that is particularly helpful, and this is going to sound really weird, but I listen to music when I write. And so I'll have certain songs that I only listen to, or certain types of music that I only listen to when I'm writing, try and get really strong stimulus control, which helps get into the writing mood faster. So I'll sit down, and for me, my writing music is jazz and house music. Those two just get in the writing zone immediately. So
no lyrics,
continuous beat and melody, something that isn't really distracting. I can just drone out the noise. And so when it's okay, it's 6 o'clock, it's writing time, sit down in front of the computer, it's on the calendar, put the headphones on, have a cup of coffee next to me, do the same routine. So it's sort of builds up to it, and then, establish a behavior chain for it. So get the coffee, put the headphones on, turn the music on, open the Word document. Okay, writing time. And then just go from there. And that helped me a lot, because even, sometimes you just get up and you're like, I don't have anything in me. I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't want to do it. And it's like, okay, well, I'll just make a cup of coffee and, we'll see how it goes from there. It's like, okay, well, put on the headphones and see how it goes from there. So that helped a lot.
Cool.
So I wanted to provide some student insight, because in helping author a book like this and being a full-time student, so when this book was being written, I was just buttoning up my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I learned pretty early in my degree, and this is a tip for any students who are interested in writing books, when you're given assignments in your class and you're able to choose your topic, make your topic about what you want to write your book about, because you can take all of those assignments and all of that work and you can apply it to the whatever other writing that you're trying to do. So what I did with a lot of my writing for this book was I had assignments due in class. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this assignment on the PDC because I've got chapter 4 of OBM Applied due, and I need to do a pretty intense lit review for this. So I learned that pretty early in my graduate career, and it paid off so much, later on.
All right. We have a lot of students who listen to this show, so that's a cool hack. So thanks for sharing that.
It's also good for your thesis and your dissertation. So if you've got assignments in class, make it about your thesis topic. Make it about
make everything do double duty.
Absolutely.
I've been ABD for about 5 years, so
I will be ABD in May, so I'm going to know that pain very shortly.
Yeah, I'm on a permanent leave of absence, so when I get back on the horse, I'll certainly keep that in mind. So one other kind of, I don't know, writing. I was going to call it writing minutia, but for one reason or another, I find it interesting. So the idea of publishing, and you guys made a decision to self-publish, and I should have mentioned this 100 times during our conversation. You guys are on lulu.com, right? And I found the book by going to lulu.com, and there's a big search bar, and you can type in OBM Applied ! It
will work without the exclamation point,
Okay.
so everybody knows.
It's the only OBM Applied on Lulu.
It's the only thing that says OBM at all.
Anywhere.
All right. So even if you just put OBM,
it'll come.
So lulu.com, lulu.com. Certainly we'll make all the links available in the notes to this show, certainly. So tell me about the decision to self-publish. Certainly these days, there's so many options available to writers. So did you guys kind of wrestle with the decision to self-publish or go with a traditional, or was it, talk about how you reasoned through that process?
So at ABA Technologies, we have a series of materials that are published through Lulu already as part of our courses that we do through Florida Tech. So many of our courses, specifically the course sequence for individuals that want to become certified in behavior analysis, we have the course sequence available through Florida Tech, and all of the materials for each of our courses are printable through lulu.com. So we were already familiar with Lulu as a print-on-demand service. When we were writing OBM Applied, we did talk about publication options. So we talked about going down the route of a major publisher. We talked about self-publishing and the like. We finally turned to self-publishing for a variety of reasons, but the main ones, I think, that I can recall from memory now, so many months ago now, is one, self-publishing gives us a lot of flexibility. So if we wanted to, say, update a whole chapter, we could do that and then submit it back to lulu.com for print on demand, so the next purchaser of the book would get the new chapter without having to do a second edition of the book.
I see.
That's a huge flexibility for us, and we fortunately, knock on wood, we haven't had to do that yet, but we already have some plans in mind of things that we want to improve anyway. So that's one. The second is from a business standpoint, and this is good for anybody that's your listeners that want to write a book. Self-publishing also gives you more return on investment, meaning whatever you sell the book for, you actually get more return as a company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge benefit for a writer, for a company like ABA Tech. And then the third reason, and I'll end with this one, is ABA Technologies, Lulu is just the printer. ABA Technologies is actually the publisher. So ABA Technologies, one of our strategies for the next 5 years is to actually publish more material, more works. So this is actually one of the first books by ABA Technologies Publishing as a publisher that's being sold in the open market. And for us, because our mission is to disseminate and educate in behavior analysis, we are expanding ourselves so that we're not just doing it through courses online or courses through Florida Tech. We're also doing it through the written word. And so this is that's another reason why we did it. What we have learned from major publishers is that it's very difficult to sell them on what is behavior analysis and what is OBM, and it's such a big market. And unless you're an established writer or somebody, it's very difficult. So we learned that major publishers would be more than happy to bring on your book if you do well in a print-on-demand service. So it's very feasible that over the years, if OBM Applied does very, very well, a major publisher one day might be knocking on our door to say, hey, we would love to take you on and put you in our publishing house. So.
Okay, so that doesn't close the door entirely on that.
No, in fact, Lulu is so great that it's a print-on-demand service. So if we wanted to take it off of the shelves from Lulu tomorrow, we could. The other thing that Shannon is honing in on, and I'll let her talk more about it, is Lulu also gives us the capabilities of linking to other online providers of book sales.
Yeah, so Lulu has this new concept called global reach. And if you format your book in a very particular way, they will then distribute it to Barnes & Noble. They will put it on Amazon, and they will do all these other things. Your return on investment is going to be lower, but at least you're going to be in those larger markets. So we're looking to do a little bit of formatting, more formatting.
No bullets.
To be able to get no more bullets. To be able to get it into global reach and get it into Barnes & Noble and those other online retailers.
So we really mean what we said. We want to disseminate and educate OBM across the globe. And so for us, it's worth the investment in putting in the time and energy for whatever formatting work we have to do to get it across all these markets and all these different outlets. So it is something that's in our 2017 plan to do, and we're excited to do it.
Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate you guys coming on and being so transparent about how you went through this whole process. I think there are lessons aplenty for all the listeners of this show who either are contemplating a career change in OBM or looking to integrate OBM into their own clinical services, which is a huge need, as we've discussed previously. And of course, those folks who are contemplating writing a book, so there's a lot of real actionable stuff here. And I really want to thank you guys for coming on the show. The book is OBM Applied.
Exclamation point.
There you go. Little intraverbal fill-in. I was hoping someone was going to pick up on it. Thank you, Shannon. A digital high five there, right? Fist bump. And it's available at lulu.com, and just write in OBM or OBM Applied exclamation point in the search bar, and you're good to go. So Manny, Shannon, and Dan, this has been a really fun conversation. Thanks for joining me on the Behavioral Observations podcast, and hopefully we'll get you guys back on the show to give us an update on how the book is received or other projects you have going on at ABA Technologies.
We got many, Matt. We could talk for ages.
Plenty of content for you.
All right, great. I'll hold you to that. All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Matt. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, folks. Well, I hope that interview inspired you to get your OBM on. I really appreciate the time that Shannon, Manny, and Dan gave us today, and they provided lots of cool and valuable tips. And you can get those tips at behavioralobservations.com. They were, as I said at the outset, they provide a little cheat sheet, if you will, on staying productive during the writing process, especially when you're collaborating across multiple authors. So again, go to behavioralobservations.com. And I also want to remind you that the book is going to be on sale, or the books, I should say, plural, there's 4 of them, until the end of the 2016 calendar year. So head on over to lulu.com and put OBM in the search bar, and you'll be good to go. So go ahead and check that out. And I think that's going to be a wrap. If you do enjoy the show and you haven't done so already, the last thing I'll ask is that you head on over to iTunes and do a rating and review. It's a little positive reinforcement for me. I'll be quite candid in that. I love getting the feedback. And I think that's going to do it for today. And we'll see you the next time in session 19. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.